We have a new expansion for the game Darwin's Journey, and this one is the Oceania expansion. This is going to be adding a bunch of new content that you can mix into the game, but it's also going to be introducing a couple new mechanisms as well, which I will get back to in a second here, because if you are not familiar with the original game, this is a really solid Euro game where players are going to be placing workers in order to take various actions. But what is really cool about the way that the worker locations work in this game is that in order to use a location, two things need to be true. That location needs to be purchased by any player at the table, which is indicated by the lenses here, but then also the worker that you place there needs to have the appropriate seals that are also indicated on that location. What's even more interesting about that is that each player is going to have their own player board where they're going to be putting their different workers, with each worker being associated with these rows of spaces beside them. And as you play throughout the game, you're going to be acquiring new seals, and you'll decide where you want to assign those within those rows, essentially adding more seals and specialties to the various workers, which will expand the different locations that they might have access to. This is a really fun mechanism, and the game itself is really well designed. It does seem like a lot when you first crack open the rulebook, but once you play this a single time, things really flow really well and everything makes sense. And because it's so intuitive, it really does minimize the amount of frustration or overhead or fiddliness that you might experience with typical Euro games in this weight class. I guess I would classify this as just a really elegant design, and that is one of the reasons that it is still in my collection today, and it's also the reason why this one is my own personal pick of the week. But there's a bunch of different actions that you can take in this game, and you might have noticed this map at the bottom of the board, and this doubles as a place for players to sail their ships and take various actions and explore the different islands, but it also acts as the timer for the game because there is going to be a boat sailing across the bottom here, and once it reaches its final destination, it's going to be triggering that final round. You also don't want your own personal boat to fall too far behind that round checker boat because that can cost you victory points throughout the game, so of course there are action locations that allow you to sail your boat forward, and this not only keeps you up or even ahead of that round tracker boat, but you can also choose to move through different spaces that can grant you bonuses, and moving past certain spaces also grants you access to the other islands, and it is always nice to get there first because you will have first dibs on the different options and resources there. When you reach islands, you can camp there and drop off different explorers, and there's different actions that allow you to do that, and you can also discover different flora and fauna on these islands, which you can also log using other actions in order to gain money throughout the game and victory point multipliers at the end of the game. Players will also have stacks of stamps on their own personal player boards, which they can use actions to move onto these different envelopes here, and this works as an area majority where at the end of each round you're going to be checking these and seeing which players have the most stamps in those different spaces and getting the appropriate rewards. Of course, there's also actions that allow you to get more of those seals, which you can then assign to your workers to gain access to more locations, and there are also some special action locations which can be randomized every single game, and they can offer a whole variety of unique effects. Another thing that I really like about this game is that there's all sorts of different spaces out on the main board or on your personal board that if you're able to either uncover or cover up those spaces, you're going to be getting whatever reward is outlined on it. For example, placing out your camps will allow you to gain the bonus next to that specific camp token, or placing out all the stamps in a particular stack will unlock the bonus next to that stack. Players will also start the game with a few different objective cards, and you can try to complete those to earn their bonuses, and there are also different objective tiles that will be appearing throughout the game, and if you're able to complete those, you'll actually be placing them onto your own personal player board, unlocking any of the powers that you decide to put those tiles on. Players will also want to keep an eye on the different round bonuses, which are outlined and randomized on tiles at the bottom of the board, and these are going to be rewarding victory points at the end of their respective round based on the requirement that is outlined on that tile. And that's pretty much everything there is to Darwin's Journey, but there are some existing expansions and mini expansions included in the core game, but of course we're here to learn about the new expansion. And this introduces a bunch of new content for pretty much every aspect of the game, including new flora and fauna, and even including a new map with new islands that have different features like camps that all the players can use, and even different locations where you're going to be putting randomized action tiles, and in order order to gain access to that action, you need to reach that location with one of your explorers. There's also new valuables that you can discover on these maps, like stamps that are worth twice the value when you're checking for area majority, or even gold coins that can pay an entire cost of something with just that single coin. But the biggest change this new expansion introduces into the game is the concept of hazards, and these are going to be outlined on different components and also on different tokens that are going to be scattered throughout the different islands. Every time you move over one or acquire a token with that icon, you're going to be moving up the hazard track, which is going to be associated with some sort of negative consequence that gets resolved at the end of each round. The problem with moving up this track is that you're going to have to deal with that consequence multiplied by your current position on that track. This, of course, can be very costly, but there is a small silver lining here because each one of these consequence tokens are also going to have a specific reward associated with them, and whoever is the furthest ahead on that track at the end of the round is going to be able to take advantage of that reward. But if you'd rather not risk it, there are different actions and locations that can grant you antidotes, which you can use to move down that track. Of course, the new expansion also comes with new player boards, which will have new special abilities that you can unlock, and many of them are going to be taking advantage of the new mechanisms that the expansion does introduce into the game. If all that sounds interesting to you, I definitely do recommend checking this one out, if not for the expansion, but at least for the base game. And this one is available on Tabletop Simulator if you do want to try it before you buy it, which I always do recommend, and I will have a link to the campaign in the description down below, and of course you can click that button to get notified once it launches.